Mike Deary from rockguitarpower.com and superguitarlicks.com, and today we're going to be talking about how to change chords faster. And this is a topic that I love talking about. It's certainly related more towards beginner players and people kind of learning. Cool, thanks, Bobby. So if you're just starting out, or if you're trying to push into really getting to that next level, learning how to change chords and do it faster and more precise and more clean and clear is a huge thing to overcome and get better at. And there's definitely going to be some tips and tricks that I'll share with you that's going to help accelerate this and get you doing those things faster. So we're going to take a look at a couple examples today. And the first one is going to be just playing a standard 12-bar blues chord progression. And then the other thing we're going to talk about are the chords to the verse of Hotel California by the Eagles, one of my favorite tunes to kind of teach, and especially one of my favorite chord progressions to work with because it's got a little bit of everything, as we'll see. But we'll get to that. So the first thing we're going to do is, let me share my screen from my computer here, because I want to share where the resources that you could find what I'm going to be talking about on Rock Guitar Power. So what you'll be seeing in a second here is rockguitarpower.com. And one of the places that we're going to jump into talking about the 12-bar blues is a lesson that is based in our Volume 1 course. So that's here on the dashboard. And if we go into Volume 1, what we're going to look for is a lesson called the 12-bar blues. And that's this one here, Lesson 4. So this lesson is going to talk about the chords that make up the 12-bar blues. And even before we jump into this one, the first type of chords that you're going to learn if you're just starting out, or even if you're not. Cool, hey Dwayne, how you doing? Awesome. So the first types of chords that most people learn are open chords. And those are all the chords that you learn within the first 3 frets of the guitar that have all your chords that are used in a lot of common songs, all right? And just tons of songs, actually. That's lesson 3 here, so if you want to check that out, go check out open chords, and you're going to have this nice master chart that has all the main chords that you learn, and then we have videos to teach you how to play each of these. But let's jump into talking about the 12-bar blues in this chord progression, because we want to jump right into an example that uses chords that we see a lot and that put it in the context of a song or a jam. So what we're going to look at first is the 12-bar blues in the key of A, all right? And this is going to start off using 3 chords. We have A7, D7, and E7, all right? Now, I'll jump back to this screen in a second, but what I'm going to do is bring in a different image that's going to highlight just that 12-bar blues so we can see this a little bit better. So what we're going to talk about here is the first 3 chords. Obviously, the first part to learning, a song or being able to change chords are knowing each individual chord, okay? It obviously sounds pretty easy. It's not a hard idea, but there's a lot to that, So if we take the 3 chords that we want to learn for this progression, A7, D7, and E7, okay? We're going to learn each one of those individually. A7, D7, and then E7. So one of the first tips that I give to people to learn to move faster is the technique of playing each chord correctly, and also making sure, if possible, that your fingers are connected at some point. Here's what I mean. If we take A7, and you can probably see my hands pretty good here. So if I try A7, a lot of times when people learn this chord or any chord, they have a lot of space in between their fingers. This makes your fingers have the ability to wobble, and that's not good because it leaves too much room for air and for your fingers to kind of move all over the place. So when you start, you want to make sure that I could put these 2 fingers together. Now what happens is my hand and my fingers act as one big finger. Even though I'm only using 2 fingers for this chord, I want them to be super stable. So if they're open and they don't have any place that they're touching, they're going to wobble. I'm going to lock these two fingers together, get my chord nice and tight, and make sure I get a good clean sound out of it. So we're going to keep coming back to that idea of making sure that your fingers become one big finger at some point, okay? Let's take a look at that same concept when we do D7. So if we do the D7 shape, we have these three notes here, all right? So again, when I have this chord down and sounding good, if you look at my fingers, all three of them are attached at the knuckle here, and they're all pushing into each other. So now my hand and my fingers are literally locked together like this once I have the shape. And this is going to make my hand and my fingers really steady and firm. So when I move in between chords, the thing that I want to try to get to as quick as possible is that feeling of all my fingers being tight together and that I have one solid shape down, not three fingers that are all spaced apart where everything's wobbly. This really makes things difficult, and it makes you struggle to try to get the chord in shape. So the first tip, when you're working on learning your chords, make sure that you're able to put them together so that they all form one big finger at one point. Okay, there's not many chords that you do, so the other one that we have in this sequence is E7, right? So middle finger on the second fret of the A string, first finger on the first fret of the G string. Now you can see how if I'm learning this, it's very easy to put all this space here in between these two fingers, right? But what I want to make sure that I do is to make sure that these two fingers lock tight together somewhere. Now I got one shape that my hand is much more sturdy and firm with. So now when I get to this chord, it's not wobbling all around and I'm not trying to figure it out as I go. Okay, so tip number one, when you're learning your chords, find some place for all your fingers to connect so you could push into them and have one big finger. Okay, so that's just a technique and a tip for learning individual chords. That's first, because you got to make sure that your technique is good with each individual chord before you learn how to change to them, okay? Now, the other thing that we have on screen here is a strum pattern, right? This is a strum pattern that's just a little bit more fun to play than a standard, 4 downstroke pattern. But by all means, keep it simple, okay? If the pattern on screen, so if we learn this, it's just down, down, up, down, up. Okay? Down, down, up, down, up. You can see my right hand. The goal when you get this good and repeat it is that my right hand doesn't stop. Okay? It's always going to keep moving. Essentially, it's just moving down and up. So if I were to play every down and up, it'd be sounding like this. It's very standard and it's fine, but something to make it a little more interesting is that. And we're going to use that in this chord progression. But by all means, keep it simple. You could start with just one strum per chord. Okay? So we have a few different strum patterns that we're going to work with. But the other thing to keep in mind is simplify. Okay? We'll come back to this a lot too. Everybody always wants to learn the end result right away. They want to learn how to play a song the way it should be played right away. And it's fine, that's a good goal. But keep in mind, that's not the way it's going to happen. All right? You're going to learn things, slowly. You're going to learn things in a manner that breaks it down. And then as you get better, it all comes easier to put it together. Okay? So, what we're going to do now is put a strum pattern to a chord. So we get our A7 down. And now we're going to do, let's start with a steady 4 downstroke. Okay? Now, I'm going to now move to D7. And now the first thing that people do when they're learning guitar or trying to get better at moving chords is they'll do this. A7, now I'm going to do D7. I put this finger there, this finger here, and then that finger there. Now I'm ready to play my chord. Okay, so this is a fine way to approach it, but the problem is, at some point, if you keep thinking in terms of moving one finger at a time and waiting to strum until you know the chord's going to sound good, you will always be behind beat and behind tempo. Okay? The goal in learning to change chords faster is so that you could play with the rhythm of your song, your groove, or whatever. Okay? I don't want to skip a beat. Okay? It's not about that long pause. So, how do we overcome this, or what's the next step with this? The first thing to keep in mind is that it is okay to sound like crap. You're gonna sound like crap when you first do this. It's natural, it's the way it's gonna happen, and be proud of that. Be happy about that. Everyone's very scared, or they don't want it to sound bad when they learn, for good reason. But one of the things to think about is if you can get over the idea that it's gonna sound bad for a little bit, because you're working on it in a way that's going to help you get to a better result at the end, it's mentally going to help you just be okay with it. So the first thing to think about is don't worry about it sounding bad. Because what we need to learn how to do is keep moving in the same rhythm and tempo. All right? The other thing is, obviously knowing the chord shape that you're moving to good enough so that you can move right to it. So even before you apply a strum pattern to different chord progressions or different changes, see if you could just do the shape without playing. So in other words, we got to do A7 to D7, right? So I got A7 like this, and now when I move to D7, I could just sit here and practice coming up and coming down. I'm going to come to D7, let's go back to A7. I'm going to come up and come down. And if you notice, what I'm practicing here is moving all fingers at once. So when I go to A7 and then to D7, I'm hovering over all the notes, and then I'm going to put all my fingers down at once. Okay? Again, it might seem boring, but it is. It's part of it. All right? So get over it. So anyways, if I practice this though, what I'm doing is I'm taking out the element of strumming. You got to break things down and simplify. There's too many things that happen at once for you to just do them all at once if you've never done it before. So if we're doing chord changes, don't worry about strumming. Don't worry about playing the chord. Worry about the shape of your fingers and making sure that you can move in between the shapes comfortably. And see if you can get it so that all your fingers drop down at the same time. Okay? Again, it sounds like a simple idea, but stop and look at the way that you approach learning chord changes and see if you still are in the position of doing one finger at a time. Okay? At some point, you got to get away from that. And the best way to do it is don't play anything, because then you don't have to worry about sounding bad. All right? You just got to worry about getting the shape down that feels correct. And when you get there, again, make sure that all your fingers are connected so that your hand is one big finger. All right? So, we're going to make sure that we have our fingers together and we know the chord shape well. And then when we move, we're not going to play. We're just going to come up and move between the shapes. Okay? Now, once we're comfortable with that, we're then going to try to obviously strum. All right, now I'm going to move to D7. Now, the next tip, to practice sounding bad. Practice being okay with sounding bad. Just start with a steady 4-stroke pattern, 4 downstrokes. No matter what, the goal here is to not stop your right hand. I'm just going to keep strumming, okay? Because again, you need to mentally trick yourself to play faster, even if it means sounding bad. Don't worry about it. We put down our A7 chord, find a slow tempo that's comfortable. Now what we're going to do is when you're ready, practice moving to a D7. Okay, if you noticed, it didn't sound great right away. I was still in this mode of putting one finger down and then the other finger and then the other finger. That's okay, because what I'm practicing here is being able to keep my right hand or my strumming hand, if you're a lefty, keep strumming and do not stop at whatever tempo you start at, okay? Okay, you gotta train your brain to get over the idea that you're gonna stop until you think it's gonna sound good. Okay? You got to push yourself into a realm of uncomfortability. And in this case, it's a very low result. If you're a bodybuilder, you're going to go through a lot of pain to get to that next level. At least we don't have to deal with pain when we're trying to improve our guitar playing, for the most part. It just doesn't sound as great, all right? And that's okay, because it will sound good eventually. So, just strumming. Up. Use that one. It's a little more fun to hear and a little bit more fun rhythm, but that's not what's important. If this isn't easier, use just downstrokes. All right? So, the other part of it, ooh, lost audio. That's not good. Can you guys hear me? Does everybody else hear me? Let me make sure before I keep moving on. I have what looks like audio on my end, so let me just make sure. It's back. All right, cool. That's weird. Let me know if that drops again. So, now that we know we got to kind of move forward with the chord, even if it doesn't sound good, move forward with your hand, all right? Keep strumming and simplify. Just because you hear the rhythm of the song that you want to play using some fancy strumming, or maybe it's in a different time signature, just keep it simple. I could even just do one strum per chord, okay? But if I want to practice something, you want to do it in tempo. So what we're actually going to do is come back to our website now on Rock Guitar Power. And what we're going to do is look at the backing track that we have here. So we're still working on this 12-bar blues in the key of A. And this right here is going to be a backing track that plays this chord progression. So it starts in A7. It's a little loud. Okay, now we're on D7. Back to A7. E7, all right, so that's our chord progression. So how do we simplify this? Again, let's do just one strum per bar. That gives us a lot of time to get ready for the next chord. Okay, so in this case, we have A for 4 bars, right? So right away, I'm going to strum A. Make sure it sounds good, and then immediately start getting ready for D7. All right, check it out. Here's what I mean. 3, here comes D. All right, I got it. There's D. Back to A. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. Now E7, I'm getting it ready. 2, 3, D7, 2, 3, back to A. All right, so basically, I'm just simplifying this by playing one strum per bar or per chord, but I'm still playing in time, and I'm still playing to the rhythm. I'm just not using the same strum pattern that the song is using yet. But it's a win. It's a progress. It's being able to play to something that you're trying to play to. You're just simplifying it. So again, don't worry about trying to play or learn the exact way the song is played right away. Start with a very simple version of this, okay? And with chords, the rhythm that you strum with is usually the thing that really trips people up, because moving chords faster entails using a rhythm and keeping that rhythm. And a lot of times that rhythm is too fast. You know, if we get something that's nice and quick, So we took that 12-bar blues, sped it up, and used a real fancy rhythm. Now I need to be able to play change chords even quicker if that's the case. But I could play that at a fast tempo. 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, and still play this and just simplify it. So find a way to make anything you're trying to learn simple by taking out elements. It'll give you more time and more brain capacity to kind of work within what you're trying to achieve. So if we have our chord progression here, again, first thing is strum once per bar or once per chord. Then try once per bar. And then as you're ready, add more rhythm to what you're doing. But always thinking in terms of when that change is about to happen, do not stop whatever rhythm you're doing, okay? Even if it makes the chord sound like crap. It's more important in this case to keep rhythm moving than it is to make it sound good. Sounding good is the goal, but it's not the end, it's not the goal you're immediately working on. The immediate goal you're working on is learning how to change chords faster. And to do that, you need to let go of the idea that you're going to have it sounding perfect before you strum. Okay? Again, you're going to do your first practice is just learning each shape down really good. And then you're going to then start working towards changing it and getting it to move quicker. All right? So, and if anybody has any questions on that, let me know. Also, again, it's an open Q&A here too. So if you guys have other things you want me to touch on, write them in and I'll hit upon it after we hit this kind of core content. So the other thing that I love about this lesson here and the lesson on the screen here is that all we need to do is learn one other chord shape, B7, and we could do a whole different blues progression in E rather than A. And B7 is a great one to learn because it now gets using all 4 fingers. A lot more going on. So you want to make sure you really get this shape. But again, look at all my fingers. They're all connected. So I have one big chunk of a hand here that's my shape. Because when I get my chord shape down, I want to get them all together and make sure that my hand just doesn't move. None of the fingers move either. And that's going to keep my chord sounding really good. So if I'm going to practice going from E7 to A7, I'm going to go to E7 and then B7. Okay? And that brings up the next point. When you're changing chords, one of the things that's going to help you move faster is to look for notes that don't need to be changed or moved. Okay? So again, it's a simple thought, but you'd be surprised at how many people don't think about that or apply it. All right? So in other words, when I'm going to do E7, we need to then move into B7, right? So if we do E7, and then I go to B7, if you look at my hand, I can make it look like I'm barely moving at all. That's one of the tricks that you're trying to achieve, okay? If you're playing things really efficiently, then you shouldn't look like you're moving all that much, you know? So and that's for chords, for scales, soloing, or anything, you know? Yngwie Malmsteen, one of the fastest, guitar players, he looks like he's so effortless because he really minimizes his movements and only makes the motion he needs to make to get the note to sound out. So if you see him play, for how fast he's able to play, it barely looks like he's moving. It's that economy of motion. You want to do that all the time, anywhere you can, all right? So if we do E7, we go to B7, I don't need to move my middle finger, so I'm not going to, all right? I'm going to pivot around it. I'm going to kind of move these fingers down a little bit and move my wrist around, but that's it. There's no need for me to go E7. Okay, now what do I got to do? I got to put this finger here and then this one here. Why take your hand off and reset everything when what you need to do next is part of it's already done. Your middle finger's down, so don't move it, okay? So pivot and move around the fingers that don't need to move, okay? 9 times out of 10, you're able to do that and not need to kind of shift everything all around and so forth. So, good, another tip there for you. And again, certain chords are just trickier. And when you find chords that are going to be more difficult, spend more time on learning them better. It's really all there is to it, But there's certain tips and tricks for each different chord that might be challenging. But these open chords are so critical to learn well because it really does open up that idea of how to learn a whole bunch of different shapes and get through them all. But again, learning each one individually will help you get through that. So if I want to jam to the 12-bar blues in E, same strum pattern here. Let's hear it. So here we go. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. Again, I'm starting simple. One strum per bar. Here comes A7. Okay, I move all my fingers up, and then I move them and put them down at the same time. E7. Now B7. I'm not going to move my middle finger. Okay, A7. E7. B7. Okay, so one more tip here. You know, if we look at the change from B7 to A7, okay, again, I'm going to look at what's common. Now, there aren't any fingers here in B7 that are common to A7. It's pretty much, you know, everything kind of needs to change here. However, what is very similar is that the middle finger and ring finger are in the position they need to be. They just need to come down a string each. So again, there's no reason for me to take my hand off and look at the fretboard and then say, okay, now how do I do an A7? Don't kind of relax like that. Stay focused and say, all right, what's similar about the shape I need to move to? So if I'm on B7, A7, I just got to bring these two fingers down and take my other two fingers off. So B7, A7. Really close by. No need to kind of do some fancy movement and then reshape my whole hand. Take what you have and figure out the minimal amount of movement you need to make to get to the new shape. And then back to E. All right, so again, minimize your movements. Look for things that are similar in the shape that you're moving to. And always practice going backwards too. Yes, that might not, it's probably not the way the song goes. It's not the way the song's going to go. But number one, it's a good way to practice something different. And it's a way to kind of just discover stuff. You might find a little groove or a progression that sounds cool if you go backwards on the way something was written. You never know. It's a good way to break you out of your comfort zone. So try different variations on what you're working with just to expand your musicality and your abilities. And, you know, there's never two shapes that's not worth practicing changing between. Even if they don't sound good together, you'll get a lot of benefit from practicing the different shapes and practicing moving between shapes that aren't familiar to you, okay? Again, the thing that you're also thinking about while you're doing this, get your hands up in the air if you need to and get the shape as close to the way it needs to be before you put anything down. And then drop your hands into the shape that you're going to and see if all fingers can come down at once rather than one at a time, okay? All right, so there's your 12-bar blues progressions. Again, real simple, but very powerful, and you could apply these concepts to so many other songs that use open chords. But what we're going to do now is look at a more advanced chord progression, and that's going to be the verse 2, Hotel California. So this is the chord progression here. Now, a couple different notes. This song, if you're really kind of going from the pure standpoint, the main guitar, I believe they use a capo at the 7th fret. And that's going to allow you to use all open chord shapes. I love teaching this song without using a capo. Number one, you don't always have a capo around. But number two, if we try to learn this without a capo, it's going to give us a lot of ability to work on different techniques that are super useful. The biggest thing being that we incorporate both bar chords and open chords to play this, okay? So let me just play through this progression as we have it written here on screen. So we got B minor, and then F sharp 7. We have A major as an open chord, and E7, G major, D major, E minor, and then F sharp 7. Okay, so that's our chord progression. Now, the other reason why I love teaching this song for this concept is that there's such a variety of chords, and it's a nice long progression, okay? And that's going to be really expanding and pushing you. The other thing is that you notice that I have, on top of the chord, what type of chord you play. For B minor and F sharp 7, we're using a bar chord. And if you're not familiar with your bar chord shapes, I did write them right underneath there. However, if you're still if you're learning bar chords, if we go to lesson or volume 2, let me come back to my screen share here real quick. So if we go to Rock Guitar Power, and if you're looking to learn more about bar chords, we're going to go to volume 2. So let me get back to my dashboard here. 1 second. There we go. So if we go to our dashboard, what we're going to do is go to volume 2 right here. There we go. And we have a lesson on major and minor bar chords. Okay, right here, lesson number 3. This is going to help teach you bar chord shapes. That's a whole different beast in and of itself. We'll talk about it a little bit with this chord progression, but this lesson here is going to teach you all the stuff to learn how to do these bar chord shapes, all right? They are more advanced, but they're definitely going to open up a massive world of you being able to play just about any song that you want, because learning these shapes will allow you to have a movable bar chord shape that you can move around with. Also, there's a lot of chords that just are not available as an open chord, okay? F sharp 7 is not something that you could play using an open chord. You need to use a bar chord for it, okay? I don't have 7th chords on here, but again, we'll look at our sheet that we have on screen in 1 second once I bring it back. So we'll get rid of this guy and we'll come back to this guy. Okay, so looking at the progression here, we're going to start off with B minor. Now again, if I'm using a bar chord, one of the tips here is, again, I'm still going to try to connect all my fingers as much as possible. Now the first finger for the bar doesn't really connect with the other 3. But as you can see, once I have my shape down, all 3 of these fingers are tight together, just as if they were doing an A minor chord. And that's all this is. If I did an A minor chord with these 3 fingers, moved it up 1, and put my first finger down, that's a minor bar chord on the A string. So if we look at it, we have the 2nd fret, we're pushing that down with our first finger, we have our ring finger and pinky down on the D and G string on the 4th fret, middle finger on the 3rd fret of the B string, and my first finger is also pressing down the little E string. So it's barring and having all those notes. So now, and again, don't worry about the strum pattern. This uses a lot more involved strum pattern. Okay, but again, you could simplify 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3. Again, don't use a very busy strum pattern, okay? Now, again, what I'm going to do is look to find out what's similar between my changes. If I want to move faster, I want to minimize movement, all right? So if we start off with B minor like this, what is similar when I look at the F sharp 7, the next chord coming up? Well, what I could do is first bring up all my fingers and then just take off my pinky. And there we go. So B minor. Again, if I can make this look like I'm not even moving. Okay, but it's a totally different shape. Not totally different, but you can see that there's so much similar between the two that I'm not coming off of B minor and being like, okay, now let's see, okay, I got to do this finger, this finger. Look to find out what's similar and stick with it and only move what you need to. Okay, especially with bar chords, because they're very intensive on your muscles. There's a lot of work you need to do to get these chords sounding good. One of the main tips is to keep your wrist around, okay? The more I pull my wrist back or my hand back, the harder it is for me to keep my first finger straight and have it pushed down with the pressure needed to get a good full sound. So I'm gonna make sure I push my hand and wrist out and get that sounding really good. Okay, so that's those two chords. Now what we're going to do is go to open, the A major. Now, again, this is just a matter of knowing your shapes, knowing what you need to move to, and again, trying to get all your fingers down at once. Another thing that if you notice on A that I did, if we have A, F sharp 7, one of the things I do here is use my thumb to stop and mute the big E string. When we do A major, we don't want the big E string to ring out. We want the open A string to be the bottom note in the chord, okay? So, rather than me worrying about being careful and not hitting the big string, I'm gonna practice playing this shape so that I don't need to worry about that. I want to make sure that I could play this shape by strumming all the strings. So if I play A major, I could do this and be careful about not hitting the E string. Or I could use my thumb to mute the big string. And now if I hit it, that noise, that sound will not do anything to the quality of the chord. You're gonna hear the bulk of the chord, and I now have the mental freedom to not worry about being careful with my right hand, okay? Usually if you're worrying about learning how to move chords quicker, you're dealing with strumming. And strumming is all about that big range of motion and really feeling free. You know, picking and doing like fancier patterns or using your fingers, it's a different story. But with strumming, you're making these big movements. And to learn to move quicker with your chords, one of the things you need to make sure is that you're not worrying about being very careful with your strum. You want to be able to learn your shapes so that you could move between them without stopping or changing the way you strum, okay? So, F sharp 7, A major, E7, G, D, F sharp 7. So one of the other tricks too is that in between chord changes, there are a lot of times you're playing the strings open. You're doing that. So in other words, if I play A7 and then move to E7, if I break that down, listen to what happens right before I play E7. I actually hit the I do an upstroke and play these three. So there actually is this one little hit that I make that kind of keeps sound coming out. And that happens actually between every chord change. So I could sit there and work on this so that doesn't happen, but it really breaks the flow of my right hand. So that actually is something that even though this technically is not a chord in the song, it's going to be a movement and a sound that actually helps glue things together, okay? So it's okay to do that, especially, you know, in this case where it's kind of the way it's played. But don't be afraid of that, you know. And also, even you could use that same concept to get you through different parts. In other words, if I want to do this, so something I'm doing here is the goal here isn't to try to play the song and the changes as it's written, it's to keep my right hand moving. And what I'm doing is, in between changes, playing muted chords so that I can keep rhythm. And what I'm doing now is thinking about the next shape I need to move to. I'm thinking about what it looks like, and then when I'm ready, I'm just gonna go to it and try to keep everything sounding good and move there quicker, okay? So, moving through these changes, you got A major, E7, G, D, E minor. And now F7, F sharp 7. Now there's a big change. If we go to E minor, there really isn't anything that's similar when you move to F sharp 7. So it is one of those motions where I gotta come up, I gotta reposition, and get down. But if you notice, the second I come off of E minor, I'm already getting in shape for the F sharp 7. Come up, boom. Right away my fingers are getting in shape for that F sharp 7. That is just practice. That is, you know, the act of sitting there and doing something so many times that you don't need to think about it, okay? The repetition of practicing these chord shapes is what's gonna pay off for you being able to come off a chord, get that chord shape ready in air, and then just put it down, okay? So try that out with whatever chord progression you're working on, or, you know, try it with the Hotel California chord progression we have here. Okay, so anyways, that chord progression is really fun because it's gonna really challenge you to use a ton of different techniques. And, you know, the end goal is obviously to use a strum pattern like the one we showed or the one in the actual song, but don't worry about doing that right away. Do it step by step, learn the shapes, move throughout these shapes without even playing anything. Make sure you can do that first, okay? Once you're able to do that, then throw in a simple strum, whether it's once per chord or per bar, throw that in the mix. Then try adding some more strumming. And see if you could do something so that you could play along to the song. You'll get a big boost of gratification and a big, you know, just, it's rewarding to hear yourself playing to the stuff that you're trying to learn. And if you play and do it, even if it's simplified, but you do it that sounds good, you are gonna be really excited about that. And especially if someone that you know, or like, you know, a significant other, your kids are hearing you practice, they're gonna hear you connect and play the song correctly. And you're like, whoa, that sounds good. That's a win. Celebrate the wins. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it, man. So anyways, there's a whole bunch of stuff there for you to dig into. If you guys have any questions, let me know. I'm gonna sign off pretty soon here, but those are a lot of the tips that I use and are helpful that I've seen a lot of students have success with to learn how to move those chords quicker, okay? And it's always, you know, it's always something that you're working on. You know, when you get into studying really difficult music like classical or flamenco or fingerstyle, you know, I come back to these lessons in these same concepts because they'll work with whatever level you're at. It's just applying it the same way and taking it step by step. Hopefully that helps. So I'm gonna play another tune, and in the meantime, while we're closing out here, if you guys have any other questions, let me know, but check out Rock Guitar Power if you're not already, rockguitarpower.com or superguitarlicks.com. Super Guitar Licks has a free course, an intro course called Soloing Essentials. Rock Guitar Power has a free 7-day membership. So check that out and you get access to the lessons that I talked about in this video. You could always reach me, Mike at Rock Guitar Power. If you have questions, absolutely just write in and ask me. And I'm always looking on new ideas and techniques and things to do these lessons on. So if you have questions, let me know. Cool. All right. Thanks, EC. Appreciate it. Wayne, let's see. Hold your chord shape hard enough to feel the strings. Lift your fingers just off the strings and then refinger the chord. Great to do while watching TV or videos. Yeah, so I always have mixed emotions on that. Yes, it is an absolutely good thing to do. You know, if you're totally in zone out mode and you're watching TV, you know, just sitting there and going through the motions, do it. You know, they even make those little travel guitars that are just the neck, you know, and it's a good way to practice the shapes. Just sitting there and doing this, go through the motions. You know, if you're gonna set time to practice though, do it without distraction. So both are good to do. Just make sure you understand, what am I trying to achieve with this? If you're watching TV, it's great just to move those fingers through the shapes. Okay, just like, you know, like Wayne's talking about. You know, and that way you're just keeping those shapes moving. But if you're in that zone of practicing, you know, turn everything else off and really focus on these things. You'd be surprised at how quickly you could see progress. And again, one of the biggest tips here, don't be afraid of sounding like crap. It's gonna sound like crap. Push through that and get it to sound better. You'll get there, I promise, okay? All right, so let's see. What do we wanna do, an original or a cover tune? Let's play a cover. We'll do some Superstition. Okay, there you guys go. Never heard you put fingers together, but notice that I've been doing it except for my bar chords. You got it, yeah. It's a good tip. I'm glad it helped you out. Hopefully it's something new. All right, guys, Mike Deary. We'll see you guys soon. Stay tuned to that email, and I'll let you know when I do a new lesson. Meantime, send in any questions or other topics you want me to do lessons on in the future. Later, guys.